Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and welcome to Season 2 of the Audiobook Club with John York. The Audiobook Club, partnered with Pro Audio Voices, celebrates audiobooks, the amazing people and teams who make them happen, as well as the various talents behind storytelling. To learn more about Amplify and other opportunities to grow your sales, platform, and audience, head over to proaudiovoices.com and listen out for a short but informational advertisement within this episode. Let's start the show. Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. Today we're so lucky to be joined by voiceover artist, fellow podcaster and voice coach, Nic Redman. Nic, thank you so much for joining me on the show. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure to have you. So as is a little tradition on this show, I'd love to start by asking you about your background. Could you tell us a little about how you found yourself in the world of voiceover, as well as specialising in vocal health?
Yeah, so I trained as my journey's probably a bit of a cliche. I trained as an actor. I was titting about the West End doing musical theatre, and then one day someone was like, "You're Northern Irish. Will you come to the studio and record this stuff for us, and we'll give you like £400?" And I was like, "Sure." So off I poodled, and I did in hindsight, probably very boring corporate for a medical, like a it was a telly that was going to play stuff in a surgery or something.
Okay.
So I did that, but I just loved it. And I had one of those moments of like, ping, this is good and fun, and that guy seems happy, and yeah, that was great. And then they give me money for it, and I was like, hang on a second. So I pursued that and infiltrated a little voiceover meetup and talked to people and did what I do when I get my head set on something, which is find out how to do more of it.
Yeah.
I heard that everybody had home studios, so I was like, well, I'll need one of those. So I got some money and I bought a home, like, let's call it a home studio. It was very, very loose setup. And like literally had to crawl into almost a cupboard on my belly and record lying down. And then I just got in the blower and I told everybody I was available and I was Northern Irish and I had a studio, and that seemed to be pleasing. And then I just got obsessed with voice and like the power and the potential of human voice. You know, having spent so much time in musical theatre and having people going, you sound great, but you look wrong. You look great, but you sound wrong. And everything being in some way in those days, like linked to aesthetic, I just found it so liberating and exciting that it was just about my voice. So I went back to Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in London, where I did my training in musical theatre, and I did another master's degree in voice studies, and that was training to be a voice coach, and that was kind of the final piece of the puzzle. So now I spend my time either on the mic talking myself for this or my podcast, or helping other people on the mic, and it's brilliant.
That's fantastic. So did you say you started out in acting before transitioning over to voiceover? Was performance then always on the cards for you?
Yeah, I think so. Although once I got to the reality of what a life doing musical theatre was in the West End, I was like, what was I thinking? I hate working nights. This is terrible. And the sacrifice wasn't quite worth the gains for me at that time. And I was finding it really tough. And it wasn't, that little girl dream that I'd thought of. So I had always aimed and always wanted to be a performer, and had been my entire focus for my whole life since I was tiddly-widdly. And then I found mic performance and I was like, this is it. I'm much more comfortable, not in vision, just my voice. And, when I talk to my mom and dad about it, they're like, well, you were always doing impressions and you were always doing silly things with your voice. And I'm like, oh yeah. I remember now. So I think it was always destined to be. But what I love also about the coaching is that I just feel, without wanting to sound too like, I mean, I'm not bloody Mother Teresa, but I love help. I love also feeling like I've got a worthy skill that can help other people. Like that's a really nice, satisfying thing. And the older I get, the more I just love working with people and helping them find their voice and feel comfortable and confident and open and expressive and engaged. Like, I love it. It's great.
Did you find that obviously, running your own business and offering these services, did you find that the business side of things came naturally to you, or was that, because you have the performance side and then you have the business side? Which did you find that like sort of they came hand in hand, or was it something that you had to work on down the line?
I've always been self-employed in some way, so there was an element of always being very self-driven.
Mm.
I've had the odd part-time job to supplement things over the years, but I was always more comfortable plowing my own furrow, as my dad would say.
Yeah.
And I love the freedom that comes with it. And I think the older I've got, and the more, funnily enough, I think the more I got into coaching, the more business, the more I've invested in learning about running a business. When I was doing voiceover, I think I was very Irish about it. I was very much like, well, I'll just make friends with people and then maybe they'll give me some work and I'll just get in the blower and I'll just tell people that I'm here. And turns out that's what's called networking. So I wasn't really like business focused at that time more than I needed to make some money and I needed to make
Mm.
this venture work.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing much in the way of like incredibly impressive stuff. I just made myself known. That was the focus. And, I've met
Yeah.
some of my closest friends in voiceover because they've seen me in a Facebook group at some point
Mm.
making an idiot of myself or commenting on something, or like I've just always made myself I'm just friendly, I think.
Yeah.
So that's number one business tip: be friendly, just be friends with people, and good at your job, and hopefully everything else will fall into place. Now that I've been coaching and I've been sort of building that side of my business for nearly 7 years now,
Mm.
I am like all over it, like business strategy, quarters, goal planning, goal setting, and I love it. And I love
Yeah.
that it feels more organized and more tangible. And it's not just, well, hopefully I'll get some work this month. It's, well, I need to make this much. So how am I going to do that? Let's work back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And that's funny enough, that's probably where the voiceover career planner came from, that I set up with Leah Marks, who is my co-host on, and they're very much the driving force behind the Voiceover Social podcast that we make. I have a load of business planners here, but none of them were quite right. And I said to her, I think I might like to make a planner. Do you want to help me? And she was like, yes. So that's when that project kind of snowballed down a hill and became the Voiceover career planner.
Fantastic. It's tremendously helpful. You mentioned networking there. I just wondered if you had, for ones who are, getting into this industry, perhaps haven't, been around all that long, what would be your sort of top places for them to join? Is Facebook the go-to now? Is there other areas that you would say to definitely get involved in?
Yeah, I think you can't get away from the fact that an online presence is hugely important. I think with social media, you have to go into it with an awareness of how much of a time suck and how much chaos it is in there, and have a goal and a desire and do what you need to do and then get the hell out again. I've had work through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I get a lot of work through my website. So I think you have to, it's not about saying, well, you have to do this one, because that one might not be for everybody. And if you don't want to be on Facebook because it's an absolute hellhole, then I have a lot of respect for you and I'm jealous. And then don't go on Facebook. There's loads of castings happening more on Twitter now, which I find interesting, and Discord and some of those other things. And if you're coming up in one of the younger generations, then that might be more your vibe, Whatever it is, you have to remember what it's about. And that is that it's about creating relationships, I think. And somebody gave me a rule, God, yonks ago now, I can't even remember who it was. It's probably just a general rule, but it's like the 80-20 rule, and that is 20%, this is what I do, 80% connection, sharing with other people, asking questions, building community, showing value, all that kind of stuff. Then it's like 20% PS, this is my demo, aren't I good, book me. The problem happens with all that kind of marketing when you're like, me, NDA, ho, 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 me, new demo, oh, NDA, me. Or anything that becomes, hello at Curry's customer service, I'm terribly upset with why my washing machine isn't here. So I think the 80-20 rule, whatever social media you choose. And the other thing is, remember that there is strategy behind that as well. So there are some brilliant people you can follow on Instagram and such who help with social media strategy and organization. So you're not going, well, what do I post? Like, what do I put today? So
Yeah.
it's about understanding that you can plan really far in advance, and then it becomes really lovely and manageable. And you can have lots of interesting different types of content or like pillars of content to talk about. So you're not constantly sharing like boot selfie over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's tremendously helpful, and certainly a trap that I've fallen down myself. So, moving on to a little bit more, talking about voice coach side of things. Vocal warm-ups are, of course, incredibly popular. I know many narrators who listen to this show have their own practice for this. But for those who are perhaps new to the industry, those who may not yet know much about why or how to warm up before a long session in the booth, could you speak a little about why this is so important and perhaps how one can get started in building a warm-up routine?
Yeah, of course. So I think a warm up is important because it's about preparing your voice to do the job in the easiest and freest way possible. So,
Mm,
particularly with audiobook narration, that falls into the category for many people of extreme voicing. That can
mm,
be 6 to 7 hours recording in a day, that can be hundreds of characters,
yeah.
loads of accents, vocal gymnastics, loads of emotion. It's a big feat, and it's about getting your voice and your mind and your body ready to go. So it's preparatory. The benefits of doing a warm up are like manyfold. Um, but I think the main one is making your speaking job as easy as possible. So you want to be able to have as much range, as
Mm,
much clarity as is necessary, as much expression, as much access to different vocal varieties and tones if you're trying to do loads of different characters. And in order to do that, you need to warm things up, and a decent warm up needs to release tension mainly,
mm.
and then tone and excite the bits that are going to be doing the work. So
Okay.
it's about releasing tension and then connecting with your breath and getting your mind in the game as well.
Mm,
And then toning and getting the response active so that when you go to make a particular sound or you get a tricky set of words in a row, you're not having to work really hard to get over them. So for me, the warm up process is about knowing your voice quite well. And that is a process and a journey. So it's about reflecting on certain processes, like when do you feel you get vocally tired? How long do you feel like you can record for? What's going on with your body on the microphone? How's your alignment? Are you having issues with breath, or do you trip
mm,
up over particular words, combinations of sound, like the same
mm.
combinations of sound all the time? And with a bit of reflection on your performance, you can start to kind of backwards engineer the sorts of things you might need in your warm up. And that's sort of what I encourage in the summer course. It's for sale at the moment, actually. It's Shagahara. It's called the Vocal Empowerment Program, and it's about getting you really aware and understanding your instrument and what you need to do to it in order to prepare it. And then it's all
Mm.
the loads and loads of exercises that you can piece together warm ups from, and resets and cool downs. But the four things to think about are your body, your breath, the sound, and
Mm.
speech then, so the forming of the words. So body is all about releasing tension. That can be spine rolls, shoulder rolls, neck stretches, wherever you feel your tension. Then breath is all about release of the breath and making the breath coming in and out nice and easily, and
Mm.
also then connection to support and engagement of the breath. And then sound is all about the vocal folds themselves. So that's getting the vocal folds vibrating nicely. That's getting the breath coming through nice and consistently. And also understanding and opening up the different resonance potential you have for like different tonal varieties.
Mm.
And then speech is all about shaping. So that's your articulators, which need to be first released of tension and then the response worked on with like tongue twisters and silly consonant drills and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Those are the four steps I recommend. And those are the four steps we work through in the vocal empowerment program.
I'm so pleased you mentioned the vocal empowerment program, which I do have a few questions about that in a little bit, if that's okay to dip more into that. Now, continuing on with like pre-booth, pre-recording session kind of stuff, there's a lot of, I don't know if they're rumors or we hear a lot of talk about, there's certain foods that we shouldn't consume before a session. There's certain, activities obviously we shouldn't do. There's certain things that we need to steer away from before heading into the booth. Is there any sort of truth to that?
Most of it is nonsense.
Yeah.
That being said, every body is different and everyone's
Mm.
digestion is different and the way everyone's body deals with mucus and saliva is different. So the key to this again is awareness and a little food diary. So if you
Okay.
feel like every time you eat bananas, you get more mucusy, write it down. And then you know
Okay.
something is reacting in your body that's making you feel a bit more mucusy. Like it's different for everybody. What happens is we get these things, these sort of myths perpetuated that then make people panic, and then you get people giving up dairy and caffeine and spicy food and alcohol and
Hmm.
this, that, and the other. And it's just, God, can you imagine a life without any of those? Like no job's worth that. So my point is, don't panic.
Hmm.
Um, track what's happening within your own body. The main culprits are dairy and coffee usually.
Okay.
And honestly, if I told some of my clients they had to give up their morning coffee, they'd leave. They don't need to. So the myth, but I'll bust a couple of myths. One is that caffeine dehydrates your vocal folds, is what you hear. Caffeine
Hmm.
dehydrates your voice, and caffeine itself can be a diuretic, which means it makes you go to the toilet, which can dehydrate your body sometimes. But you'd have to drink an insane amount of it in one go for that to have any effect on your vocal folds. So caffeine, as far as we know right now with the newest research, is that it will not, quote unquote, dehydrate your voice. So you're
Okay.
fine. What some people find maybe is that caffeine can exacerbate reflux if you've got reflux issues,
Hmm.
which can cause excess mucus, which can cause a feeling of, having to clear your throat all the time or having to swallow quite a lot or lots of mouth clicks. The other thing is that if you take milk in your coffee, because milk is thicker than water, the milk may hang around in your mouth a wee bit longer, make you feel a bit claggy in your mouth. So it's not
Gotcha.
that it's dehydrating, it's not that it's forever making your mucus thicker, it's just that it's a thicker liquid. So
Yeah.
it will coat the inside of your mouth a wee bit. So just don't have a coffee like 8 seconds before you press record. Have your milky coffee an hour before, half an hour before, and then swill your mouth with water and on you go. So the coffee thing is mostly nonsense. Thank goodness, because most
Yeah.
people need it.
What a relief.
Yeah, yeah. And then similarly with dairy, it's about if you have a particular lactose intolerance, then there may be issues within your body, and that's for you to gauge. But dairy itself won't thicken the mucus on your vocal folds, quote unquote, because it doesn't go anywhere near them.
Hmm.
Nothing you eat, drink, suck, or swallow goes anywhere near your vocal folds. It goes down a different tube. Otherwise, we'd die because we'd choke. So sometimes, yeah, if you have a big cheese sandwich for your lunch, you might feel your mouth a wee bit more mucousy because cheese is thick, like anything else is thick, and that might make you feel a little bit sticky. So it's just about giving yourself the time to get past it. And with spicy foods and stuff, that's again everybody's body processes those differently. They make me
Yeah.
burp a little bit. So I had some accidentally spicy food yesterday, and then I had to go do a workshop online, and I was a little bit like, okay, and now just burp, a reach up to the sky, let's stretch out the ribs. Like I was a little bit. I was like, what were you thinking? Well, that's nothing to do with my voice. It's just my body. And then
Yeah.
I was doing a wee chat with somebody else recently, and they were talking about gurgles, belly gurgles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were saying that after about an hour, they get gurgles in their belly. And they spoke to a stomach specialist and said, well, yeah, that's a very normal process. So you just need to make sure that if you find your tummy gurgles an hour into your session, that's maybe when you have your first break, or eat
Okay.
earlier or eat later. So it's all about assessing who you are, how your body
Hmm.
reacts to these certain things, and not panicking. And I always just like to mention as well that sometimes people like a reason for there being a problem. And it's much
Hmm.
easier for that problem to be, oh, well, it's the coffee, it's the milk, it's the spicy food. And it's much harder for them to admit that they actually need a little bit of coaching or a little bit of work in their technique. So I'm just going to
Hmm.
leave that hanging there.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. I can't tell you how many people that's helped, including myself. You've coached and worked with talent such as Denise Welsh, Sarah Millican, Angela Batrick. When someone contacts you, interested in your services, could you give us a rundown of what that process looks like? Do you offer weekly sessions? Is it a one-off consultation? Could you speak more about your one-to-one coaching service?
Yeah, sure. So I don't take anyone on without speaking to them first.
Okay.
Because they need to know I'm right for them, and I need to know
Mm.
that I can help them, and they're right for me. So we have a wee chat. I've just had a couple this morning, actually. We have a wee chat. They tell me the problem. I tell them what I can offer and what I suggest. And then I have two packages at the moment. One is a 2-session package and one is a 6-session package. I
Mm.
don't offer one-offs anymore because I don't find them hugely they're not as beneficial for people as a little bit more commitment and accountability.
Mm.
So the 6-session package is like 6-hour-long sessions plus a load of support in between. So you can call me and be like, "What's happened to my voice?" Or "I just did this read. What do you think?" Or it's about forming a relationship, because voice can be quite um exposing, and
Mm.
your voice is connected to your psyche and who you are and breath and tension, and that can sometimes bring some stuff to the surface, and I need to know that I like people to know that they can trust me, and that we have a relationship. So 6 sessions is about that, and it's about a journey that we
Yeah.
go on together. 2 sessions is sometimes for people who've already done 6 and they want a bit of a top up, or they've never done any coaching before and they're terrified and they want to give it a go and see how it works. So
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely love it. I love the bespoke nature of one-to-one. And I love that every single client, even if it seems like they have the same issue, always ends up needing something slightly different to work with. It's
Mm.
really good. It's really exciting, and it keeps me on my toes and constantly training myself to make sure I'm ahead of everything. But yeah, I also do like the online courses, which have been amazing during lockdown, because
Yeah.
sometimes pre pando, pre panny day, um, people were a bit scared of online coaching, I think sometimes. And I would meet people and go, "I'd love to work with you, but I live too far away." And I'd be like, "Well,
Mm.
I work online." But now everyone's online, which is amazing. Even
Yeah.
for me, like I've been able to coach with all kinds of people all over the world that I wouldn't have been able to get training with otherwise. It's brilliant.
Mm.
So I love the online stuff because it's like little communities, and I'm kind of obsessed with like bringing people together and making people be friends. So
Yeah.
like every course you do has lovely little communities that come out of it, and it's gorgeous. Same when I have my retreats. So I run voice retreats as well at our place here in Northumbria, and every little retreat goes away like with its own little WhatsApp group and everybody's buddies, and it's really nice. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's about relationships for me ultimately.
So I saw that the Ultimate Voice Getaway retreat is happening in March, I believe.
Yes, there's
Um,
still a space actually if anybody wants to join.
I'd love to know more about this retreat. Could you give us what one could expect from
It's
attending?
amazing. When I first started these retreats, I was like, everyone will leave with all the answers and it will be amazing. And then people came for the retreat, and all of a sudden I realized that retreats aren't about finding the answers and having
Hmm.
all the cures. It's actually about dialogue and discussion and being curious and opening yourself up to the things that you might need to work on. So basically, here's how it works. Everyone arrives on the Thursday night, and I cook dinner and we get to know each other a bit and have a little chat. Then Friday, Saturday daytime, we spend in a gorgeous little studio in Northumberland National Park, and we do loads of really indulgent voice work. It's like body, breath, massage, release. It's like very drama school vibes. And some
Yeah.
people have done it before and some haven't. But it's all about connecting with your body, your breath, finding vocal variety and exploring the voice, and then onto articulation and stuff. And then the next, that's the first day. And then the second day is like half that, plus any troubleshooting if people have particular things that have come up the day before. And then
Hmm.
the final bit on the last day, we tend to work with some text. So if I had one group that happened to be all audiobook narrators, so we did some audiobook text.
Hmm.
Then another one was voiceover folks, so we did voiceover stuff. And then another group was a mix, so we just did poetry and things. But we work with words then, and we bring all that lovely stuff we've developed onto the voice itself and saying things. And there's a lot of time, and this is what I don't think I appreciated when I first set the retreats up. I was all about, we need as much voice work as possible, as much voice work as possible. And yes, we do, but also there's time in between. So we have a 2-hour break every day on those 2 days where we're in the studio,
Hmm.
to go for walks and like explore the area and just holistically relax and release and get some air and get some energy going. And I do little guided walks, and if the weather's nice, we do wild swimming in this waterfall near me, and we have some really good food and have a lovely time. So it's a really
Yeah.
holistic, top down experience. It's like mind, body, breath, loads of crack. We have it here at our place. We've got like hot tubs in the garden and a bar, and It's
Nice.
gorgeous. It's just great. So yeah, if you want to come, there's space. There is a wee bit of space on the March one if anybody wants to come join.
I think especially for those who record from home, I bet it's a real treat to get with, your peers, in the flesh, and really just sort of be immersed in it for a couple of days. I bet that's a real treat.
And actually, the thing I find most with voice mic users, because I tend to specialize in mic users, really, is that sometimes we forget we have a body. Like it's about your mind reads the words and they go into the microphone and that comes out of your mouth and the mouth leads, your voice comes from your vocal folds and that's that.
Yeah.
And the thing about like the amount of tensions and stuff that we can hold and carry because of that headspace and that mindset is remarkable. So they get people here and I'm like, yeah, but is doing a bit of stretching, is that enough? Should I do more of this? Should I try this? Da, da, da. And people get there and they go, oh my God, I've just let go of like a year's worth of tension and now I feel amazing. We haven't even made a sound, it's beautiful and it's lovely. It's a real like, I don't want to sound like a bleeper, but like it's a real privilege to be able to hold that space for people and
Yeah.
and facilitate that. It's lovely. So it's a voice retreat rather than like just voiceover. Although a lot of people there end up being voiceovers.
There is, as we've mentioned before, there is also the vocal empowerment program. Now, I believe this spans 6 weeks.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's 6 weeks of training over 7 weeks. So we have 3 weeks and then a break to catch up, and then 3 weeks. And it's really it's born out of the fact that I was getting a lot of people coming into my one-to-one with the same sorts of issues, which was they didn't know how to warm up properly and they didn't know where to start, or they'd been warming up for a while but wasn't really sure why they were doing it and what it was doing. They had a warm up that they learned in drama school like 30 years ago. They probably needed a bit of an update.
Yeah.
And it was about showing people and giving them the confidence to know how to look after their voice every day and every eventuality for all the recording. So it's really about giving them we do loads of exploring our bodies and our breath and our sound and our speech. And I give loads of exercises to prepare and develop the body, the breath, the sound and the speech. And then it culminates with us working to piece everything together into little routines so that you come away with a decent warm-up, you come away with a reset routine, you come away with a slightly longer, more meditative practice that's maybe body and breath focused that you want to do once a week. And the whole point of the program is so people can sort of not need me anymore. But the result of which means my one-to-one sessions are much more specific and bespoke now, because if people just need to work on warm-ups and stuff, I recommend they do this because it's really fun. And it's really empowering and that's the point, and exciting to come away going, oh, I know what to do now. Sometimes I feel people are just a bit scared to warm up about, they're scared of what noises they should make and whether they're healthy or right for their voice. So it's just about exploring the vocal capacity, exploring loads of exercises to play and develop it, and then piecing it all together. So you're coming away going, yeah, I know what to do. This is brilliant. And we also have a bonus session from an amazing lady who helps us with habits, which is becoming more and more a key pillar for me, is the idea that I can give you all the tools in the world, but if you're not going to do them, then what's the point? So she comes in and she helps us look at our daily routines, value what habits are and how to set good ones so that you can set a good warm-up habit.
There is it mentioned on the website when I was having a look at the courses, and it mentioned tongue training and jaw release training, and I just wondered if you could maybe elaborate on this and what this may entail.
So the jaw release week was the first ever online course I ever did, like in the middle of at the start of the pandemic. I just set up the voice and accent hub, which is my Facebook group, and I was like, well, I'll do a wee course and I'll see what happens. So it was like everybody joined up 10 minutes a day for 5 days, and I did a little bit of theory about your jaw and a little bit of release of the jaw, basically, because jaw tension is one of the elements of your voice and your instrument that can lead to like excess tension and ongoing vocal health issues in terms of consistency and vocal tiredness and things. But also the reason I did jaw then was because jaw release is also quite a like mentally connected tension, and we'd
Yeah.
all been locked down and it was all a bit crazy, and being
Yeah.
stuck with your family and not being able to say the words that you want to say, you clench your jaw, and
Yeah.
it was great. It went really well. So I just basically recorded all the sessions and now you can just download it. So it's like 10 minutes a day working on jaw release, and
Yeah.
that really helps with vocal freedom. Oh, and then
I'm
the
good.
tongue
Yeah.
one was like the next idea for that then. So it was
Yeah.
like same format. And you get a little video into your inbox every day with me going, hiya, here's an exercise for your tongue. And then I go, la, 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 la. And we do it together and it's great. And I've got tongue release is brilliant for vocal freedom. It's brilliant for reducing vocal fatigue. And
Yeah.
it's really good for clarity as well and expression.
Yeah. I'm really gonna have to check these out.
Yeah, I do. They're good fun.
So, accents are a common obstacle for narrators and voiceover artists, etc. You can be halfway through narrating a series and suddenly there's a big character in book 4 that has an accent that you've never attempted before. And I'd love to know your process of working with voice talent and actors on how to approach speaking with a particular accent, especially if it's one that you really struggle with.
With any accent, particularly for audiobooks, because I know it's part of your toolkit as an audiobook narrator. You have to do
Mm.
loads of accents, and yeah, they can just spring up out of nowhere.
Mm.
Is to remember that it's as holistic as any kind of voice creation process. So you've got to think about the energy behind the accent and that person. You've got to think about the shape of the mouth. So where's the tongue? How wide are the lips? What's going on with the jaw? You've got to think about the tonal quality as well. So how is it a nasal accent? Is it slightly more pharyngeal and down in the back? Or is it oral? Or
Mm.
so it's not just about doing a couple of random sounds. It's a completely holistic, fully rounded process. And you've also got to really think about a little bit as much as you can within the realms of the fact that sometimes with audiobooks, you've got to say one line in 400 different accents.
Yeah.
Is approach it with respect and understanding for the culture to which that accent belongs, be that Birmingham or South Africa or wherever.
Mm.
Accents, there's a great quote in the book, How to Do Accents, and it's something like, accents don't exist in a vacuum. They're live and they're like influenced by culture and music and people and lifestyle, and you have to approach every accent with that element of respect and understanding. Like
Yeah.
broad strokes and stereotypes just don't cut it.
Yeah, I think that's tremendously important. There's a testimonial on your website from Sarah Millican, who I just adore, by the way, where she states that because of your support and expertise, she was able to get through 225 stand-up shows. I mean, that is crazy, just mind-blowing. But I'd love to know a little more about the advice and practices that you give and perhaps gave Sarah ahead of the tour. As I think there are many narrators and voice artists that can relate to, obviously, using their voice for hours and hours a day for months on end. What can we do on a regular basis for the aids, longevity?
Yeah, she's like the hardest working in comedy, I swear. Ultimately, for me, in those extreme environments, whether it's long-term tours, whether it's waking up every day and doing 6-7 hours of audiobook recording, whether it's a game, any of that stuff with voice, it comes down, I think, primarily to two things. One is an understanding of breath, and one is release of tension. If you can sort of release as much excess unnecessary tension as possible within the body and the vocal tract, and you can work on your alignment to make sure that all your muscles can release and move, and you can find mobility in the body and then mobility in the breath and flow in the breath, then you're on to a winner. And you sort of also have to understand with breath that most people work with too much breath or get really hung up on like big breaths in and having loads of breath. So finding a balance and flow in the breath is crucial. And then the second thing is, release of tension in the vocal tract itself. So releasing the tongue root, the jaw, the soft palate, the throat, all that kind of stuff, which through no coincidence is also linked to use of breath. So if your breath flow, if your I can't speak anymore. If your breath flow is out of whack, then your jaw is going to be tense and your tongue is going to be tense because they're going to have to help the vocal, the larynx do its job. So it's about breath, and release of tension. And those two things, paired with a really acute, constantly evolving awareness of what your voice needs, and not just doing what everybody else does because somebody says you should, are the key, I think. And consistency, like 5 minutes a day.
Okay.
Do not need to spend hours, little and often.
So make it one of your habits, one of your daily
It has
habits.
to be, yeah, it has to be.
The Voice Coach podcast has helped and continues to help so many people in the industry not only learn more about the ins and outs of why our voices do certain things, but learn practices and strategies for, longevity, as we've just spoken about, overall vocal health and empowering your voice. I'd love to know how this podcast came about, and what is it about the podcast medium that suited you in order to get these important messages out there?
So it came about because I really enjoyed doing the Voiceover Social podcast with Leah. We've been doing that for about 6 years maybe by the time. And it was then when I suddenly realized how much of a podcast nut I was. I listened to podcasts loads. I get my own training a lot from podcasts. And I loved the fact that there are no the barriers to listening to podcasts and having training via podcasts are very minimal. Like all you need is access to the internet and a way of listening. There's no fee involved, basically.
Yeah.
And that was really important to me. So the first thing was I love podcasting as a medium. The second thing was it kind of made sense to me because it's about voice and voice only. And we're better to do that, but in a voice only medium. And then I think the third thing, I could find loads of podcasts on singing, but not a lot on spoken voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why is that? And I wanted it to feel like a training program. There were singing podcasts out there that were like, do these exercises. And there was none. There were a few public speaking podcasts and there were a few people talking about voice, but there wasn't really a podcast about spoken voice that was like, okay, here we go. Let's do this exercise. And that's what I wanted to offer. I wanted to show people little tiny snippets and how much that could help with like really minimal input. So I think it mainly came about out of tenacity to make voice training as accessible to anybody who wanted it. Like I really struggled with the fact that voice training, even when I was training as a voice practitioner, I had this amazing training with so many amazing, incredible people who do all they can to get voice work out to the greater population. But it felt shrouded behind, the doors of people who could afford, who needed public speaking coaches for massive gigs or because they were politicians or because they were huge public speakers or because they were actors. And I was like, that's not fair. Like voice is such a brilliantly holistic practice that it can help anybody. Like I feel like voice training should be in schools.
I
feel like understanding releasing your tension and like working with your breath and all that kind of stuff is so beneficial. And I was like, well, I want anybody who can find a podcast to be able to get at this without it having to cost them any money. So that was sort of the main thing behind it. Plus, I'm really comfortable on the mic and I find it really easy to create. So if I'd started a YouTube channel, it probably would have lasted about 2 weeks. But with podcasting, like it just was a really convenient, easy way for me to do it as well.
Well, I think on behalf of, I know many of the listeners on this show, I just want to thank you for doing it because it's a tremendous help. I wanted to leave you with a question that I get asked quite a lot from listeners of this show, and it's all to do with the majority of the listeners of this show are starting out the voiceover, careers and audiobook narration careers around like a full-time job, meaning that they have to record super early in the morning before the rest of their day, or perhaps really late at night once they've finished the shift. And especially if you're recording really early in the morning, you don't have a lot of time. Obviously you have to get as much done in the shortest amount of time. And I just wondered, is there anything that they can be doing if you have to record super early in the morning, perhaps not, your voice hasn't fully woken up yet, perhaps they haven't become adjusted to the day. Is there any sort of helpful tips that you could give us for those in those situations? Yeah,
of course. So keep your hydration up all the time. Make sure you're systemically hydrated, i.e. you're taking in a lot of fluid in your diet or by drinking wet things as much as possible. And the other thing is, if you're recording early in the morning, try not to eat too late at night. So try and stop. I think you need to leave about 3 hours probably before you go to bed. minimum, just to make sure your body can digest and there's no risk of any kind of reflux or indigestion, because that can cause issues with the voice and excess mucus. So you might know that that's an issue if you feel like every morning you're a bit croaky, or every morning you have to clear your throat a lot, or you feel like you've got loads of mucus. That might be linked to some kind of reflux situation. So try not to eat too late at night. And the other thing is, get up and get your body moving as quickly as possible. And then once you've got your body moving, do a few exercises that are... So semi-occluded vocal tract exercises basically are really good for getting the breath and the vocal folds ready, shifting the mucus and getting you ready to go. So anything like a classic one is a lip trill. If you don't like lip trills, then a gentle puffy kind of mouth trumpet like is really nice. Also THs or any puffy fricative is really good. So get the body going, get your vocal folds vibrating safely through a nice semi-occluded vocal tract exercise. Keep your fluids up and don't be midnight snacking.
That's fantastic. It is difficult. Before we come to a close, I'd just like to ask, is there anywhere in particular you would like to direct our audience to find out more about your services, projects, anywhere that you would like to direct their attention to?
I think probably my Instagram is probably the quickest way. So I'm at Nic Red Voice. And in my bio link there is links to the vocal empowerment program, the retreat, the podcast, everything you could possibly need. If you're not on Instagram, just go to my website, nicolaredman.com.
Fantastic. And all of the links to Nic's website, social media, services mentioned, and the Voice Coach podcast can be found in the show notes. And that just about does it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. And of course, another huge thank you to you, Nic, for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I've had a lovely time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Frustrated by the royalty rates for your audiobook? Annoyed that when the digital distributors say 70% royalties, they actually mean 70% of 50% or 80% of 70%, neither of which is an actual 70%. Wishing there was a way to cut out the middleman? Yet, you want your audiobook listeners to have a smooth and positive experience, and a direct download sale from your website won't deliver that. We at Pro Audio Voices hear you. Out of our commitment to our author clients, we've created Amplify, a program that provides an actual 65% of the sales price that you set, that gives you access to your customers' names and emails so you can reconnect with them, and keeps you in the driver's seat. Check it out at proaudiovoices.com. You'll find Amplify in the marketing menu.